The most important job faced by a democratically elected government is to make sure its citizens are kept safe. However, the line political leaders have to tread when deciding how honest to be when explaining the threat a society is under is a very tricky one. Too much information can instill fear, too little risks ignorance and panic if the true scale of the threat is realised. The shocking events in Israel on October 7th show what can happen when the reality of how safe a society is and the public's feelings of being secure get dangerously and fatally out of balance. How did Israel get it so wrong? Is it possible to feel too secure? Evidently, the answer to that question is yes. The people attending the music festival in southern Israel, close to the border with Gaza, would not have been there had they felt under the kind of threat that the world now knows was hovering over them. First, a quick word about how we should think of threats. They don't just spring out of nowhere. A threat is the combination of three things: capability, intent, and opportunity. Capability, the number of fighters, the quality of training, the sophistication of the weapon systems. Intent, what does the adversary want to achieve? By when? At what cost to themselves as well as us? Opportunity, that's largely in our power. How well defended are we? How many targets do we offer the adversary to have a go at? How much do we believe our own hype? Of course, no politician is going to say to the public, look, I'll do my best, but I'm never going to be able to guarantee your safety. Bad things will occasionally happen. However, if we analyse the different failures that combined to present such a shock to Israel, the sheer scale of what went wrong becomes clear, as does the enormous amount of work the country will have to commit to in order to put things right.
מה שקרה היום לא נראה בישראל, ואני אדאג שזה לא יקרה יותר. הממשלה כולה מתייצבת מאחורי ההחלטה הזאת.
These failures are unlikely to be confined to Israel alone. Many of the lessons to be drawn from the surprise assault by Hamas will be applicable to other nations if interpreted correctly. First, the failure of intelligence. Gaza is one of the most surveilled areas of the world by technology from satellites, cameras, cyber, and underground seismic centres ready to report the telltale signs of tunnelling, to human intelligence platforms like watchtowers, informers, and undercover special forces operating inside Gaza. All have been deployed for years to build the best intelligence picture possible of the organisational layout of Hamas and the other armed groups opposed to Israel. But has there been too much data generated for any system, human or technical, to make sense of it all? The attack on October the 7th involved drones dropping bombs, gunmen on motorised paragliders and motorbikes, and bulldozers driving through the so-called smart fence. All pretty low technology and all probably at some time and place seen by Israel and flagged on an intelligence report. But the possible military scenarios in which these fairly basic things could be used are so numerous. Is it realistic that these things would have piqued the interest of an intelligence analyst? Perhaps, despite knowing Hamas had about 30,000 fighters, Israel completely underestimated the group's capability to fight. The next failure was to misinterpret Hamas's intent. With no serious flare-up since 2021, at least with Hamas, there have been numerous incidents and attacks recently with other smaller Gaza-based groups such as Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which Hamas notably kept out of. Israel had issued more work permits, allowing people to travel from Gaza into Israel where wages are much higher. The New York Times has also reported that Gazan military leaders speaking on communications they knew were being monitored by Israel made comments to suggest they were not preparing for battle. And last month, Hamas also ended a period of rioting along the border in an agreement brokered by Qatar. It all gave the impression they were not looking for a fight. Was that the whole point? Did Hamas deliberately play down its preparations for war? They weren't going to stop training completely, of course. That in itself would be odd, and intelligence analysts are always looking for the absence of the normal and the presence of the abnormal. No, maybe Hamas directed its fighters to keep training so as to look normal, but in so many different scenarios, deployment methods, technology and weapons to hide their true intentions. And even if there was an informant in the ranks, with so much going on, how would that person have been able to see the much larger plan? Earlier this month, Israel's National Security Advisor, Tzachi Hanegbi, said that for the past 2 years, Hamas has not initiated any rocket launches as part of its decision to curb its violence in an unprecedented manner. In an interview with Army Radio on October 1st, he said, "Hamas is very restrained and understands the meaning of further defiance." Just as they missed Hamas's capability to fight, did Israel similarly misread their intent?
فقد قررنا أن نضع حداً لكل ذلك بعون الله ليفهم العدو أنه قد انتهى الوقت الذي يعربد فيه دون محاسب.
The last failure sits with the military and is epitomised by that smart fence the bulldozers drove through. The 6-metre high barricade includes hundreds of cameras, radars and other sensors, including in the sea. It spans 65 kilometres and was built using 140,000 tonnes of iron and steel. It cost over $1 billion and took nearly 4 years to complete. It even had remote-controlled weapons systems. Or look at another example, the Iron Dome air defence system, designed to intercept short-range rockets and artillery shells fired from distances of 4 to 70 kilometres. There's no doubt it works, and Hamas reportedly fired around 3,000 rockets into Israel during their attack. But they still got drones through to blind the watchtowers and the communication systems along the border. That meant the soldiers monitoring the area remotely with video cameras had no idea what was going on. Plus, by destroying the remote-controlled machine guns dotted along the infrastructure, also with drones, Hamas dented Israel's capability to do anything about the incursion, even if they did realise something was going on. It all speaks of a belief that technology would be able to give Israel the advantage over any adversary, reducing the need to deploy personnel or have forces held on very short readiness levels to react to incidents. Technology is often seen as a force multiplier, able to make up for a paucity in numbers or perceived weakness in other areas. But even if it's not actually a silver bullet, technology can often be treated as such. Plus, of course, money, often eye-watering amounts of it that is spent on fancy technology can't be spent elsewhere. There's one other military failing to note. Some Israeli commentators, often those who had held senior appointments in the military, have been saying in the days since the assault that Israel's whole strategy for the last couple of decades has been flawed. They say relying on defensive technology like air defence domes and walls to reduce the threat has shifted the mindset of military commanders away from one of spirited aggression, where fast, bold action to take the initiative in any fight was encouraged, to a much more passive one of simply managing the various defensive systems. Keep an eye out for this argument to develop in Israeli circles in the coming weeks. Had Israel unwittingly and over years allowed its adversaries greater opportunities to attack? So, the intelligence agencies could have failed to discriminate between real threats and others that were either bluffs or not sufficiently mature. The military had possibly shifted in mindset away from backing the human to one that preferred the sophistication of technology, and the politicians had perhaps completely misread Hamas's intent. Combined, these failings serve to undermine Israel's security, literally the sense of being secure. How so? Well, because whilst much of that stuff would have been completely invisible to society at large, especially the deep intelligence bits, it would have been presented to the political, military and intelligence leadership who perhaps could have identified areas of weakness if the correct questions had been asked or assumptions questioned. Now, I'm not saying any of this is easy. Good luck trying to start a military war game exercise by saying you're going to rely on hang gliders and motorbikes. I'm just wondering how loud the dissenting voices were to the systems and the ideas that have been allowed to evolve, and whether the perennial enemy of bureaucracies the world over, groupthink, had taken root. Regardless, we have now witnessed how the conclusions about how much the state knew about its enemies, what it thought of their intentions, and how well it could deal with any problems that came its way were flawed. The tragedy is that those conclusions were wrapped up in a narrative, a feeling, a projection to the public, who then made their own security judgments on how to live their lives, where to call home, to work, to raise families, and where to go to music festivals. They literally had a false sense of security. The question now is who's going to be blamed for it. Defence in Depth is a weekly video output by the Telegraph of the big defence stories. For more content, we've left links in the description below, and if you have a topic you would like us to cover, let us know in the comments. Please do visit our website for the latest updates, news and analysis, or failing that, you could read the paper.